Good morning. This is the New Thought World Religion class for December 17th. And today we're going to be talking about deconstructing the Nativity. And I kind of wanted to start, even though we did a whole series on what deconstructing is, I wanted to review that just briefly, because a lot of people don't know. It is a common term that's thrown around, but a lot of people don't know what it is. So we'll take a look at that first. So deconstruction is a philosophical concept under the umbrella of metaphysics, and it was started by Jacques Derrida. However, deconstruction has kind of been taking place forever. Like I said, it's under the branch of metaphysics, and metaphysics is the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things. So concepts like being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. And we actually, New Thought, which is what Unity is New Thought, falls under the umbrella of metaphysics. And so deconstruction is a loosely defined framework to analyze or understand the relationship between text and meaning. And so when we're deconstructing something, what we're really looking at is what is the underlying meaning of something, or does something have an underlying meaning? So like if we're deconstructing the Bible, what we're really looking at is, well, where do we derive meaning from the Bible? Does the text have innate meaning itself? And most scholars and most philosophers would say, well, the text doesn't have an innate meaning, and that the meaning kind of has evolved over time. That a good example of that is when we were doing the deconstruction, I picked some scriptures from the Hebrew text and scriptures from the Christian texts. And we sort of looked at, like, well, how would the people of that day interpret these scriptures? And we talked about how the idea of monotheism came long after a lot of the Hebrew texts. And so the Hebrew texts are pretty much written in a polytheistic perspective, meaning many gods rather than just one deity that they're talking about. Now, they did have a patron deity, Yahweh, and that patron deity was kind of like the prime being that they served. But they also talked about other deities within those texts. So I hope that's not too complicated. It won't be as complicated when we get into the Nativity. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about deconstructing religion. And why would deconstructing religion be significant or important? Do we have a microphone? Does anybody have a... Okay, so some of the answers I would have is that in our world today, religion actually plays a huge role in just society. I mean, we have Christmas decorations up all over, and Christmas decorations are from the religion of Christianity. So deconstructing religion, and there's several reasons why people would deconstruct their religion. One thing is that there's a drive to understand their faith. So someone grows up in a particular religion and they want to understand it more. Another good reason, and it's something that we do in New Thought, is we ask the question, well, why do I believe this? You know, we have all of these beliefs, many of them from childhood. And so within New Thought, it's common to hear the phrase like, whatever we believe about ourselves or about life becomes true for us. And so analyzing our beliefs, it can have a significant impact on how we experience reality, how we experience the world. You know, if we have a set of beliefs that aren't really supporting us, for example, I grew up with the belief that God was very angry. Well, that certainly shaped my understanding of the world and how I engaged with the world. I was very cautious a lot of times. Sometimes I felt like I had to do things in secret, even though they weren't horrible things, just because I thought, well, you know, I don't want to make this deity angry at me.
But you thought he couldn't see you?
Go ahead.
Okay, I don't understand. I mean, you thought he couldn't see you when you did things in secret?
I would say that at that point I was more agnostic and a part of a very religious community. Yeah, okay. So I didn't want the community to see what was going on.
Okay, so it wasn't you were thinking.
I would say, well, I mean, at the point where I was like, okay, I'm not gonna let people know that I'm a queer individual, right? Well, that was more self-protection because of the community I was in, not because I believed a deity was going to get me. But I would say that the original source of that was probably because I grew up in an environment where God was very angry.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, our logic is not always clear when we're doing stuff like that. When I would pray, whenever I prayed or needed to or something, I always stood with my back to a wall because I wasn't letting that guy get behind me.
Right?
Like a wall would protect you. So it isn't logical. I would think one of the things for me in deconstructing it is to find out why I've made the decision that I've made. Why I've made the decision. Either I didn't want church at all. I went out in the parking lot and smoked when Mom made me go to church. So,
I'd be out there with you. So.
Yeah, right. So why I made the choice I made, and then so I can decide whether I want to make a new choice.
Yeah.
Speaking of which.
No, absolutely. And we talked about within Unity, and Unity actually talks about denials and affirmations. Denials is sort of the concept about addressing the beliefs, particularly the belief that there's a power other than God that has an influence on our life is usually when we implement things like denials. But denials would be a form of deconstruction simply because we're analyzing and we're addressing innate beliefs. So we deny, like for instance, let's say our bank account is running low. And so we deny that that low balance in our bank account has any power over our ability to pay our bills, maybe, because God is our source, not our bank account. Something like that. That's just a really rudimentary example. And it's not like we're denying the reality of the situation. We're just denying that it has any power over us. And so one way to deconstruct in the context of religion is to look at the religious text through a historical and critical lens. So we can compare how would ancient people view this text, and how are we looking at it today? Now, before I get to the next slide, so I had this all set up to where I was just going to talk about the Nativity, and then I had a few conversations over the week about something that I've said in a few classes that I've taught, where I say, I don't really identify with the religion of Christianity. And I often say, I don't really identify with any religion specifically, but I definitely follow Jesus. And normally that's what I say in that context. And we've had some comments posted online about, he's not a Christian, and people are very worried about it. And I also have had people kind of say that it's, it's not a well thought out position. And it was actually brought up, I was having a conversation with Sue, but it's actually being brought up in the broader Unity context as well, where Unity is discussing, are we a Christian church, or are we a church that just accepts everyone based off of principles rather than on any specific religious ideology?
Excuse me.
Go ahead. I don't know why my words aren't showing up there.
Does anybody find that a funny thing? Are we a Christian or do we accept everyone?
Yeah, I
Oh, right.
Yeah, I thought it was funny too.
It's a real conversation that's taking place.
Thank you. But it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of videos from Unity ministers coming out right now on why I am a Christian. So I wanted to, since we're deconstructing anyway, I wanted to briefly deconstruct why I don't identify with that particular word. And I wanted to look at it, and by the way, if you are a Christian, I think that's wonderful. I have no desire to convert anyone. Whatever path allows you to experience more love, more joy, and more peace in your life, I think that's wonderful. And so this isn't me saying that you have to follow me. I don't want followers, really. So I wanted to bring this up because it is a part of, number one, a broader conversation, and because, number two, it's been brought up a few times after I taught a class, like, why do you say that? And so I wanted to give a little bit of a reason why, since we are deconstructing, this was my deconstruction method. Number one, the word Christian already has a meaning. So if you were to go around Springfield and just interview anybody, whether they identify with that religion or not, what kind of things do you think might come up in that? Like, do you think people would already have a definition of that?
Well, yeah, if you do yoga, you're not Christian.
You guys accept Jesus or you go to hell?
Yeah, so there's a salvation idea surrounding Christianity, which I don't necessarily believe in.
I can remember having a conversation with my aunt, and she said, well, of course they're, because I said somebody wasn't a Christian, and she said, well, of course they're a Christian. This is a Christian nation. So she had, she was raised with a Christian Science mom, and her husband was raised with a Christian Science mom. But she still considered herself Christian because she was an American and it was a Christian nation. And I just kind of went, really?
Well, I would say I'm probably culturally Christian because I have a Christmas tree up at my house, although that wasn't necessarily early Christianity, that wasn't necessarily a thing in early Christianity. But I definitely have a lot of Christian symbolism in my place. So I would say culturally I'm a Christian, but when I look at sort of the theological characteristics of Christianity, that's where I would say, you know what, I really am not sure that I align very well with this religion. And then when I looked at other religions, I was like, you know what, I think it's just easier to say I don't know. I don't really know. So let's look at a few theological characteristics. So Christianity has orthodoxy. Now, it's not all the same universally among the, 35,000 different denominations, but they all have orthodoxy, and they all have similar orthodoxy. So I would say instead of orthodoxy, I believe in free religious association. And to me, what that means is I want you to follow your path, whether that's Christian or Judaism or Buddhism or Taoism or whatever that is. I think that it is very difficult sometimes for people to just change their religion. I mean, if Christianity is where you resonate, trying to find a new one, it might not be a good idea, because that can bring up a lot of stuff as well. But I personally support, number one, the reason why I was in Unity is because they believed in free religious association, where we can have a conversation, whether we're Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist, Christian, we can have a conversation and we can discuss shared values and shared principles. So doctrine. Doctrine is, actually, I wanted to say orthodoxy is the claim of right belief. It is the authorized doctrine within the Christian tradition. That's what orthodoxy is.
Who authorizes it?
Yeah, a hierarchy. Human beings, a hierarchy of human beings. And that's another thing, like when you're talking about orthodoxical organizational structures, it is, traditionally, it wasn't that we got to be a Christian. That's a very postmodern idea, that we get to, I get to pick my religion. You were Christian, you were born into Christianity, and then you could get expelled from Christianity. You could get disassociated from Christianity. Yeah, right. And so this idea that we get to just pick, I think that's a fairly new concept. It used to be that the hierarchical system that was set up got to choose whether or not you got in, essentially. And so doctrine is what makes up the orthodoxy. And there are several, doctrine is just a truth claim. And that, like I said, hierarchical systems create doctrine. What are some common doctrines within what we would say traditional Christianity?
The Trinity.
Trinity, yeah.
Virgin birth?
Virgin birth would be one.
Well, you already said if that's a true, is that?
It's a truth claim, yeah. They are claiming that this is universally true, and it just depends. So, I wouldn't say that all of the Christian religion requires these doctrinal statements or
What's your comment?
But that is a common claim, is that Mary was a virgin.
You want to talk about the difference between it being true but not being literal?
Okay, you're right. Something can be true and not literal. And there's a lot of churches within Christendom that do not believe it's literal, but they believe it is a metaphor and it is true in that context.
Can you give an example
Of
that?
a metaphor? Yeah, there are a lot of people that don't believe that. Well, a good example would be if you go to the candlelight service, we will talk about the virgin birth here in Unity, but I would say that most ministers probably don't take it literally.
Then it would be the resurrection.
Yeah.
That's a very much a metaphor for spiritual awakening. And
Yeah, enlightenment. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I would say the fundamental thing that you just made me realize is that it's not what we have in common or what we do believe that is kind of the challenge. It's everybody deciding for each other if you're acceptable because you're doing what we believe God believes you are supposed to do or not do. So whether you're our religion or you're not because you're not our religion or whatever. I had a close person in my life that said, you remember those computer printout cards with the old computers with the cards with the little box cutouts in them? He said, we're not about the distinctions and differences. We're about if you held all of the world religions up, where the light shines through all of them. So I think that's what Unity promotes, is finding love each other, love your God, however you find that to work for your life's.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that Unity is a creedal system, a creedal religion.
And it's for sure the bottom line is if you don't believe in Jesus, you're out of here.
So in terms of defining the word Christian for myself, which remember deconstruction is about it's about getting to the root meaning of the word or the of the text. And so for me, I believe that human understanding evolves over time, and I think that if these doctrinal statements or these creeds, oftentimes for me what they do is they just kind of box us in, and they stop us from being able to evolve our consciousness. Orthopraxy. Does anybody know what orthopraxy is? No. Okay. Orthopraxy is it can be required rituals within a religious system, and it means right action. You're supposed to behave this way. But instead of orthopraxy, I follow my inner instincts. You could say I follow spirit, or I like to call it my inner ding. I try not to make it overly religious for myself. Because I grew up in very strict religion, so for me it's just my inner ding, my
ding.
Intuition. Ding.
That's
Yeah.
a Louise Hay.
Yeah.
Because it goes ding
Inner
sometimes.
ding. Yeah. My inner ding. Yeah.
That's a Louise Hay.
That is definitely a Louise Hay phrase. Yeah. And so for me, what that means is it doesn't mean that I constantly get messages from the other side that tell me what to go. A lot of times it just means I ask, okay, so what is the loving thing to do in this situation? What would Jesus do? What expands, my capacity to experience love, joy, and peace, and then I do my best to follow that path. And so I don't have an orthopraxy, whereas the religion of Christianity definitely has an orthopraxy. They definitely have, this is how you're supposed to, these are the rituals you're supposed to follow, and the ritual is actually my next one, the sacraments within Christianity. And sacraments are just, so Augustine of Hippo said it's an outward sign of an inward grace. And so what are some sacraments within
Communion.
Communion is the sacrament. Baptism is a sacrament. Yep.
Confirmation.
Confirmation is a sacrament. Does Unity have any sacraments? A regular ritual that we...
I got some too.
Burning bowl and the white stone.
Burning bowl and white stone, yeah. I would consider those sacraments because we do them every year. They're a practice. They're, like was said in the 5th century, it's an outward sign of an inner experience.
Yeah.
The burning bowl and the white stone, there's an inner experience. Those are reflections of an inner experience. However, the reason why this doesn't resonate with me, the sacraments within the Christian religion, is because I practice pagan rituals.
Oh my God.
Does anybody know what that means?
Yeah.
So the word pagan is used to describe, so a lot of people think neo-pagan when I say that, but the word pagan just means a person holding a religious belief other than the dominant religion of the society. That's all that pagan means. And so any ritual outside of the prescribed sacraments are actually pagan rituals, which means that white stone, and I mean, the only real place that I've ever seen white stone and burning bowl, I mean, burning bowl may be other places, but white stone specifically is Unity. That would be considered a pagan ritual.
It's scripturally based.
Okay, but it's not within the construct of orthopraxy within the dominant religion.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so that can be considered a pagan ritual.
So some of the unity rituals, some of the things where we sing, let there be peace on earth.
Mm-hmm.
It never makes any sense to me why we're saying let there be peace on earth when we're someone who believes that we need to bring it into the now. And I don't know why we don't sing now there is peace on earth. But that's another one where it's a ritual, and been in churches where the congregation wants let there be peace on earth. No matter the meaning underneath of it, it's what we do.
But there's
Or,
somebody, yeah.
or the prayer for protection. You know, the presence of God surrounds us, and the power of God protects us. And I'm going, to me, that is so way back beyond the knowledge that is taught here. We are the power of God. We are the presence of God. And so the ritual, there's so many people that no matter how we grow in understanding, we got to have it the way of,
What it was.
that's the way we do it.
Yeah, and I do think it would be a good idea to deconstruct unity. You know, when I read like the Fillmores, I definitely read it with a deconstruction mindset. But I'm actually going to talk about different ways of viewing religious texts as well, or even rituals. So deconstruction is not just about text. Deconstruction, we can deconstruct systems, we can deconstruct like political systems, religious systems, all of that is definitely a part of the deconstruction.
Can you give me the definition of pagan again?
Yes. So the actual definition, the written definition, is a person holding a religious belief other than the dominant religion. And a lot of people, when they hear the word pagan, they think neo-pagan, which is earth-centric religious practices.
Druidic and stuff.
Say that again?
Druids.
Druidic, Wiccan, that sort of practice. And I wouldn't necessarily equate the two. Like, I wouldn't consider myself neo-pagan. However, I have been very interested in rituals that my ancestors used in their spiritual practices prior to the Christianization of their nation. That's just me. I mean, I do practice some of those, but more as a way to connect to my lineage, my history. And those would possibly be considered neo-pagan, although I don't consider myself neo-pagan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So by that definition, Christianity was pagan when it first came out.
Yes.
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 Yeah.
And the Native Americans were pagan when we got here.
We were pagan when we got here.
We were
Right.
Yep.
They were the natives, we were the pagans.
Yep. We were the pagans. Okay, so dogma.
Almost perspective.
So dogma, Christianity, the religion of Christianity has a very specific dogma. Dogma is the authoritative set of rules. So both of these things fall under orthopraxy. Orthopraxy is just the way that we behave. When is it? Yeah, I don't want to take too long on these, but I am not dogmatic, I am pragmatic, which is the opposite of dogmatic. Pragmatic is about following what is sensible and what is realistic. Whereas dogmatic is this is how you're supposed to behave. And there's a whole debate on where morality comes from. Does morality come from top down? Or does morality come from empathy and experience? Yeah, inside out. Yeah, like that's absolutely where I think it is. But to me, that is a far more pragmatic perspective than it is a dogmatic perspective. It's not a set of written rules. It's about being empathetic. However, I would say that if that dogmatic set of rules is the only thing keeping you from hurting other people, please follow them. Like, yes, absolutely, you need your dogmatic, perspective. You need that from your religion. But for me, I always go back to the fruit of the Spirit. I behave in a way that I try to be loving, kind, generous, that sort of thing. And those are internal qualities. It's not because of religion has told me this is how you're supposed to behave.
So dogma is like the Ten Commandments?
Yeah, that's a form of dogma.
Cool.
Yeah. Indoctrination. Indoctrination is how we disseminate all of these things. And so what I'm talking about is my personal deconstruction, and these are elements of the Christian religion. And indoctrination doesn't just take place in religion. There's indoctrination for political parties. There's indoctrination. Indoctrination just means these are the things that you are supposed to accept without questioning. You cannot question these things. And that's what indoctrination is. And when we had a leadership meeting, and I mentioned indoctrination, and the person that was leading me said, well, Unity has indoctrination. If that's the case, I'm out. I don't even like good indoctrination. I'm not interested in people having good indoctrination. I'm interested in people accessing all of the love and joy and peace inside of them, and then living that out, and kind of out-picturing that. And so I would push back. I look at the 12 powers within Unity. That is a Fillmore teaching, and one of the 12 powers is wisdom, discernment, and judgment. It's just one power that has been relabeled a few times. That is about critical thinking. And I definitely align with that. So I'm not really a big fan of indoctrination. Bibliocentrism. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so indoctrination, you're saying, is that we need to believe something, whether we believe it or not.
It's just without question.
Without question.
Yeah.
So, I have to say, when my way into the metaphysics was through the Abraham teachers, and first time I heard them, I knew that they were my people, and everything they said was a lie. And had I not been willing to say to something, I'm going to trust this is true and do it, if I have to understand it all before I understand it, I'm trying to, do you see what I'm saying? I think we all come to a place where we have to accept some kind of doctrine as true.
Sure.
Even before we know it's true or we have any intellectual knowing. So I'm kind of confused about.
Well, indoctrination does not allow critical thinking. That's the difference between indoctrination and just. I would say that Abraham teachings in particular are not indoctrination because they encourage people to test it out, to question even. I've run across a lot of the Esther Hicks materials that talk about questioning. Go ahead.
It sounds like you used your wisdom and discernment to figure out for yourself that this is something that you personally believe, instead of being indoctrinated into believing it.
It eventually was that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I spent a fanny pack, batteries, tapes, awake, it was in my ear, 2 years, and most of that 2 years was, you big fat liars, you don't know what you're talking about, this is not the way. I was the one in charge when I was a child being abused, you big fat liars. So it wasn't like I said, this is true, or I used my intellect, but my heart knew these were my people.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how
But did you have a choice? It sounded like you still had a choice. You could have turned that off if you wanted to.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
You were already indoctrinated. And
You're
so-
brainwashed.
And so you were working your way out of it.
I was going to say that it sounds like the opposite. You were kind of, the denials and affirmation thing that I mentioned earlier. You were kind of doing the opposite of indoctrination.
Okay.
You were untangling maybe some old indoctrinated ideas. Yeah, I'm for critical thinking.
So that wisdom, discernment, judgment is more than critical thinking, is what I hear her saying. That the wisdom, discernment, judgment is mental and intuitive and instinct. It's like our whole inner guidance system that sometimes we, like she was saying, I don't know how to put it into words exactly, but you'll feel something or you're drawn to something, and it's not from the mental faculty exactly, but
Follow your game.
you can follow up with researching and learning more about it and stuff, but often I think people are led in and out of religions and practices and things because it feels like it touches the love light place, you know.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the idea of being led in and out of religions or beliefs is a fairly new concept. You know, we've not always had access to the plurality of religious systems like we do today. Like right now, we have the internet. You know, that, like, when you were, go back even just 100 years, your religion was the religion you were born into.
Right.
That was universal.
You don't have to go back that far.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
For most people.
Yeah, I mean, so something has changed within the consciousness of humanity, mainly through technology, to where we now can have a broader picture. And I would say that, you know, even people like the Fillmores or you know, a lot of the early New Thought people, they were certainly there. They just didn't have the technology to really access all of the information. Like, you know, we have something. I talk about sometimes how, you know, in context with the broader unity, and we talk about what is church, and I'm like, well, you know, 100 years ago, if you had a question about spiritual things, you went to a minister, and now you go to Google. And so the idea...
No, it's true.
It is true. And so the idea of what church is has to change with the time. And I still believe that you know, having a place where we can have community, where we can discuss principles, where we can, like with what we do at the shelter, where we can serve people. I think that having a place like this is still very important for us. But I don't know that it serves the same purpose as it did 100 years ago. Matt.
Kind of brings up the lyrics to Defying Gravity in my brain.
Oh, yeah.
I want to comment on that. I agree a lot of what you're saying, but one thing I want to say, is this on? All right, well, whatever.
You gotta get close.
So, I, in my life, have seen a lot of denominations that do put the minister up on the pedestal, don't do anything unless the minister says it's the right thing to do. And so there's still a lot of those people that are being indoctrinated with, that's just what you do, you don't have critical thinking. So I understand Google's there, and that is, you know, awakening a lot of people to deconstructing and looking into those privately. Like a lot of people that are, you know, I have some friends that have podcasts that they say, if you knew the amount of ministers that contacted me about wanting to learn more and research more privately because they're too afraid to say it publicly, I still think there's a lot of people saying, well, I need to call the pastor to find out if that's okay. You know what I'm saying?
I think so too. I would say that there's definitely, you know, if you look at it demographically, that's probably going to be people who trend a little bit older, you know, like elder millennials and older, I would say. Whereas younger millennials and Gen Z, just statistically, like if you look at Pew Research, which I love reading those, you know, I love reading those research studies, they're not necessarily getting their spiritual advice from an organization like this.
Right. James, I'm sorry, what's an elder millennial?
Oh.
Is it
So
1978 to like 1982-ish.
I'm one.
Yeah, me too.
I mean,
Oh, you mean born?
Yes.
Generational.
So that's really the demographic that's bridging the really technologically advanced. So like even if you go into, there are many schools where they're teaching 3rd and 4th graders how to code computers, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely this huge technologically. I don't know. Yeah, there's this gap. There's this, you know, where the younger generation, Gen Z, who are now getting jobs and working, and then, you know, elder millennials and older, there's this gap where some are very, very, you know, the older generation is not very technologically literate. And then you have a whole generation that grew up with computers, very technologically literate.
Yep.
And so, and the elder millennials are sort of in the middle of that. where some, like, I was very interested in computers growing up, which is why I'm technologically literate. However, there may be people out there that are my age that aren't. So we're kind of in the middle. Does that make sense?
So that explains my grandson, who today is his 9th birthday, and last week he coded a computer game.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yep.
We're in trouble.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
We were the last people to grow up without having the internet. Everyone else after us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just is a fact.
It's just a part of their lives.
I was like, well, I'm still doing it in my mouth, so I can't open it.
And then there are people that I know that are your age. Like, how do I text again? It's like, I'm not trying to be mean about it. It's just the way that it is. Consciousness has shifted on our planet in a very significant way.
Well, and it's done that in a lot of other areas too.
Yeah.
I mean, women are no longer stuck in the home barefoot and pregnant.
True.
Well,
You know, when I was growing up, I was told I could be a teacher, a secretary, or a nurse. Period.
Right.
Yeah. Or a wife.
And I said, bye. I'm going to go get wild and join the hippies.
You wild?
You got more slides, James?
I do have a few more slides. Yeah. It's okay. Well, I'm doing this for 2 weeks, and I was hoping to get to something in the Nativity. We might. I mean, since that is the name of the talk. But, okay, so bibliocentrism. Does anybody know what that word is?
Bible-centric.
Bible-centric, yeah. So my perspective, it's just a book.
whoa.
And that's even offensive in Unity. Not all of Unity, but saying that can be very offensive even within Unity. But here's the thing, it's every person in this room, right, knows more about how the world works from a scientific perspective, and I doubt we have any scientists in here, but you know more about the world from a scientific perspective than the people who wrote the Bible.
Absolutely.
Oh, we do have a scientist in here. Don's a scientist. I always think of you as a poet, but
He was a scientist.
he was a scientist. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I'm
Turn the
not,
light, okay?
and I'm not saying that the Bible is bad. We're going to talk about how I personally still use the Bible in just a second, because we're talking about deconstructing my. I'm answering the question that came up about why I don't use the word Christian. But to me, it's just a book. I have found value in many different books. I love the Harry Potter series. This is one of my favorite series. There's a lot of wonderful symbolism in it. And see, to me, using the Bible doesn't make me a Christian, just like Harry Potter doesn't make me a wizard. Right?
That's good.
Yeah, it's a book, and we can still gain value from it, and it's provided value for many people over the years, but I don't necessarily need to make it special, and I think that making it special has been problematic over human history.
Well, it's historical too, sort of, isn't it?
There are historical elements to it, yeah.
Well, it's turned into dogma.
Okay, and so finally, follower of Jesus, which is something that I almost always say when I say I'm not a Christian, I am a follower of Jesus. So, what that means to me is, this is the question that I have. Would Jesus be a Christian if he were alive today? Everybody, like, yeah, a bunch of people doing this.
Oh, hell no.
And I don't know, but I know that for me, being a follower of Jesus, Jesus, when I read the stories about Jesus, he was kind of against the popular religion of his day.
Kind of.
Kind of like a lot. Yeah. I mean, he did things, he broke the religious rules all the time to make people within that religion mad.
Wake them up.
Yeah. And so to me, that's the first question that I have. And I love the quote by Richard Rohr. It is easier to worship someone than to follow them.
Yeah.
I love that quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. And so and then another thing too, like I said, I was responding to a few comments, and then also these videos that are coming out with a lot of Unity ministers saying why I'm a Christian. I'm like, well, I just need to say why I'm not one. And it's this whole list of very well thought out things. And sometimes I wonder too when I'm watching these videos, because if you just go, I don't know if anybody else follows other Unity ministers. I follow a bunch of them, but there's these constant thread of videos coming out, and they're not very well thought out. Like one of them even said, Well, I'm a Christian because the Bible is the best self-help book that's ever been written. And I went, have you read it?
Wow.
Like, I'm not saying that it's a bad book. I'm saying that, like, I'm not certain, I'm personally not certain that it's the best one out there. Like, I've read a few other self-help books and I'm like, whoa, that's, you know.
I mean, I'm sure you can heal your life is a little bit better. Like higher on that list for me.
So here's the thing. I would say it's different. And I would say if the Bible is not a self-help book, really. You know, the Bible is a book mixed with history. So let's just talk about the Bible for a second. The Bible is not univocal. There is not, like, it wasn't all written down at the same time, and it doesn't tell the same story throughout it. It doesn't even tell the same story about one deity throughout it.
That's right.
Okay? So that doesn't mean the Bible can't be helpful to the people who are reading it. I use it, well, actually, this is my next topic. So, different ways to look at the Bible. There's a few different ways. We are talking about the deconstruction approach. But there is also a devotional approach that I use personally when I approach the Bible. And devotional just means I use it for my own personal spiritual development. Deconstruction looks at critical historical context, and it analyzes the meaning. It not only analyzes the meaning for today, like why do we believe the things that we believe today, but it looks at possibly what they were thinking when they were writing the Bible back when it was written, the different books. Devotional approach is symbolic representation, and metaphysical interpretation is a form of symbolic representation. And that is what, so I have that little candle there because the candlelight service, which is absolutely one of my favorite services at Unity of Springfield, is coming up. It's on Friday, right?
22nd.
It's the 22nd. Yes, so it's coming up. And I highly recommend all of you go. And that is a very devotional approach. It is not going to be anything like what we took, if we get to the Nativity, it's not going to be anything like what we talk about today. And so I highly recommend it. And there are several organizations or spiritual traditions that use a metaphysical interpretation. Unity, probably the one that we all know about. Church of Divine Science, Christian Science, Gnostic Christianity, Esoteric Christianity, and some Kabbalistic traditions all use a metaphysical approach to interpreting the Bible, and that would be a devotional approach. I have found it valuable for me to use both a deconstruction approach. Deconstruction allows me to sort of untangle maybe some indoctrination that I've had in the past, which still comes up even to this day. Just a few years ago, I don't know what happened. There was flies everywhere for some reason, that got into our apartment, and I had a very I had very strong emotions. It triggered the eschatological, the end times beliefs that I was taught when I was a child. And I had to, and thankfully at that time I was able to just kind of sit down, take a few deep breaths, and then reparent that part of myself. It's like, okay, this is not true. These are just flies. How they got into my apartment, I have no idea. And then I got the vacuum and I cleaned them up and they were gone and the world didn't end and everything was okay, right? So yeah, I feel like the deconstruction approach, and I think that deconstructing new thought is, deconstructing new thought, deconstructing Charles Fillmore's writings. I love Charles Fillmore's writings, but I'll tell you, consciousness has evolved since he wrote some of that stuff down.
Right.
I remember I was reading the 12 Powers book before I started attending this Unity, and it was almost the book that made me go, okay, this is not for me. Because he had a very, very antiquated view, a very Victorian view on sex and sexuality. He actually believed that if you had sex, it will drain your body of living energy and that will kill you. That's what Charles Fillmore wrote in that book. Now, I think it's safe to say that even, the broader Unity, that,
I'm still
that's
alive.
not true. Yeah. Susan's still with us, we're all fine. So yeah, I like both of these. And I think there are times when deconstruction is really appropriate, and there are times when the devotional approach is, important for me as an individual. So that's answering the question. Is anybody else offended that I don't say that I'm a Christian? No, okay. I don't think anybody that showed up today would be, but I do know that we had some comments online. I was like, well, let's. And by the way, I did that so I could demonstrate deconstruction. So does that part make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really what deconstruction is.
I have a little quick thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Wait.
It might be important that people watching know that all different kinds of thoughts are supported and allowed, and as well as sharing, when you said sharing religions and stuff, that whoever teaches these classes is not what we all, that it's one of the beauties of Unity is that teachings are multiple and beliefs are multiple, and our openness to express and support each other in that is a beautiful thing,
Yeah, one of the things that I appreciate about this class the most is that you get many different perspectives. And there are times when I am listening to somebody teaching the class, I'm like, yes! And then there are times it's like, well, that may be true for them. It doesn't feel true for me. But that's okay. Like, that's the one, when we get stuck in labels, like just the label of Christian. I'll tell you, in a lot of Christian churches, a class like this couldn't exist simply because the label doesn't allow for it.
Right.
And so that's, and I wanted to address basically the kind of the broader conversation that Unity has been having on our identity. Are we Christian or are we universal? Is sort of the conversation that's being had right now. Okay, are we ready to touch on we could maybe do 5 minutes of those too. But that's okay because I'm doing this next week too.
Lay the groundwork.
Yes. So now we know what deconstruction is. And so the nativity story, there are 4 gospels that are Jesus' story, that talk about Jesus. There are more, but these are the 4 that are canonized. These are acceptable among the religious leaders back, in the 5th century. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is how they show up in the Bible. However, Mark was written first. So it's really Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John. And the nativity story is only found in Matthew and Luke. Another thing is that each of these Gospels were written to different audiences. And you can definitely see that within the nativity story itself. Matthew was written to a Jewish audience, and Luke was written to a Gentile audience. And you can see it in the stories. They're different. The stories are not the same, and they're different. Yeah, there are different aspects to each one. Let's talk about Joseph. So Joseph has there's 2 different lineages for Joseph in the stories. And they are not the same. Joseph has a royal lineage because the narrative of Matthew was that this was the Messiah. This was the next king. The king of the Jews, right? So he needed a royal lineage. Luke, however, has a priestly lineage that goes... Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, when I was going to Bible Study Fellowship, I don't know whether it's concluded, but that the lineage in Luke was Mary's lineage.
That's incorrect. It doesn't say that.
Because there's a different father to Joseph in Luke than there is in Matthew.
Yeah, the lineage is... These are stories that are written.
Right.
Yeah, these weren't historical events.
Okay.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, these are stories about Jesus's
To serve a purpose.
Yeah, they were to serve a purpose. The purpose of Matthew was that Jesus was from a royal lineage.
Hey, Jews, read this.
And in Luke, it was that Jesus represents all of humanity. So if you look at that lineage, it goes all the way back to Adam. Yeah, and it was humanized Jesus. So, and Matt, can you get me the Bible that's in there? I want to recommend that.
Don't we all go back to Adam?
That's what I was thinking.
Well, yeah, but can you trace your lineage? I mean, that was the point. Is that Jesus is the second Adam. That was the point that they were making for the Gentiles.
They still have to be able to trace.
I recommend this if you are interested in sort of the history of each. I highly recommend this Bible. There are essays, lots of essays in the back about translations, and then there are notes. If you just look up a passage, there are notes about passages. It's the New Oxford Annotated Bible.
So it's close to what the Strong's used to be, only modernized?
It's not that. That's not the translation. The translation for that particular Bible is the New American Standard. And the New Americans, and you know, if I were you, if you really want that Bible, I'd hold off because there's a new version of the New American Standard, and they are going to reprint that study Bible with the updated version. And the updated version, as I have the updated version at home. It is my favorite, but that's the best study Bible. That if you really want to get down into like what does this mean. How would the people reading this in ancient times have read this? Who were these books written to? That sort of thing. That's a great resource.
How is that going to be different than the one that you introduced us to in the deconstructing cloth? Was it Lamas, or I can't think of.
So that.
No, I want to know.
No. So and that's an okay Bible too.
Okay.
Lamsa. That's the Lamsa Bible. Was translated from the Aramaic.
Right.
Yeah. So that was really good for that particular book, the Seven Keys. Let There Be Light: The Seven Keys by Rocco Errico. It's a really good book. It's interpretive keys to help you understand the Bible. Has nothing to do with Joseph's lineage, but it does talk about. We are actually going to address something with angels because it talks a lot about how language was used differently then than we think of it now. For example, anytime you hear the word, I saw the angel of the Lord, the angels appeared to me, all of that language just means that they've had a dream, and 2/3 of the Bible is just dreams. All that you're seeing is just people having dreams, and it's a dream journal. So does anybody have questions or comments about Joseph's lineage?
I don't understand. Who cares if it was a virgin birth?
I know, that's what I was thinking. I love that they make it a royal lineage, even though it was a virgin birth and Joseph wasn't the real father.
He's a man.
Wasn't there in the Old Testament, didn't it say when the Messiah come that they would come from a lineage? That it was a Jewish prophecy that was very important.
Let's talk about Mary, because we're going to get right into that. So, in both of these books, Mary is a betrothed virgin.
Very important.
And that's very important to the story. But was Mary really a virgin?
Oh.
Was she a virgin? Okay, so we have the word Alma in the Hebrew, and then we have the word Parthenos in the Greek. This word in the Hebrew means a young woman who's unmarried. Okay? But the original authors were looking at a translation that was called the Septuagint, which uses the word Parthenos, which is virgin. And they're like, oh, we need to make sure that Jesus was born of a virgin because that's what the prophecy said. However, that's not what the prophecy said. The prophecy just said a young, unmarried woman. And so they wrote that into the narrative, into the story, because they were writing the fulfillment of prophecy when they were writing these stories.
So man changed it, basically, like most things.
Well, I mean, and I don't know. I think, so the oldest stories about Jesus, the oldest original stories about Jesus, they don't talk about his birth at all. They don't talk about where he came from. You know, only Luke and Matthew talk about that, but Mark was the first one written. And usually when we're telling a story, the story doesn't get, like an actual historical story. You usually don't get more details over time unless there's a lot of research done, which there wouldn't have been at this point in time. So what really happened was these people needed to interpret prophecy. They needed to plug prophecy in, and because they thought, using the Septuagint, they thought that Mary was a virgin. Mary became a virgin, but it was a mistranslation in the Septuagint. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Did Mary ride a donkey?
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's not in the Bible. It's not in the gospel. And then I actually think we're going to stop there, and then we'll look at angels and the 3 wise men and the shepherds and all of that next week. But Do you mind doing the announcements?
No.
Okay.
Hey James, are we gonna look at the date of his birth or any?
We will look at Jesus'
Okay.
birth as well. Yep. Oh. Thank you, Greg, for doing the announcements.
For the people. Oh, that's probably gonna feedback me. Alright. The monthly board meeting is tomorrow, December 18th at 6 p.m. All are welcome to attend. Members who have questions or concerns about the proposed bylaw change are encouraged to attend. Next Sunday at 9:15 a.m. in the New Thought World Religion Adult Sunday School class, Mr. James Masters will present part 2 on Deconstructing the Nativity. We're going to get into the Nativity next week. There is still time to order a Santagram to be delivered by our Youth of Unity Holly Jolly Carolers. Sign up in the foyer if you would like to hire them to visit your home or someone else's home. Also, they would love for you to join them singing, and you can sign up for that in the foyer also. I carol bombed my mom, and they've been talking about it for a while now. They really enjoyed that. Thank you to everyone who sponsored a blessing bag for our unsheltered guests. Please remember to drop off your items by this Thursday, the 21st. And then we have a brand new Xbox game system up for auction. The auction closes at 12:30 today, so get your bid in right after service. The bid sheet is on the table in the foyer. Thank you for Kelly Botten for donating it. Our beautiful candlelight service will be December 22nd at 7 p.m. And the Christmas potluck is on December 25th at 1 p.m. Please sign up in the foyer next to what food you're bringing. You can also sign up on the website. Would you like to start your new year by tapping into your infinite possibilities? Save these dates. January 7th, 14th, and 21st. Freeman Payne will be facilitating the 3-week workshop, Infinite Possibilities, which is based on the best-selling book, Infinite Possibilities, The Art of Living Your Dreams by Mike Dooley. Freeman is an internationally certified Infinite Possibilities instructor and will guide you on a journey of self-discovery by challenging you to visualize your infinite possibilities and how to overcome obstacles to achieve your highest potential. The cost is $25 and pre-registration is requested. And everyone give us your money.
I'll pass the basket. If you're watching online, you can give online, www.unityofspringfield.org.
www.unityspringfield.org. Okay, yeah, I'm done.
Thanks
Thanks everyone.